Hello, you're watching Outsiders with Rita Panahi, James Morrow and myself, Rowan Dean. The world was shocked and saddened by the cold-blooded assassination of Japan's much-loved conservative former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Needless to say, some of the left-wing media has chosen to describe Abe as a polarising figure, a right-wing nationalist and a conservative whose political opinions were controversial. Really? Shinzo Abe was Prime Minister of Japan and President of the Liberal Democratic Party from 2006 to 2007 and again from 2012 to 2020. He won all three of his prime ministerial elections by wide margins, and at his final election in 2017, he was elected by a massive majority. He was the longest-serving Prime Minister in Japanese history. Polarising? Hardly. Give me a break. Shinzo Abe was a great friend of Australia, spoke out strongly in support of Taiwan, and was a key founder of the Quad. That's our alliance with Japan, the US, and India. Shinzo Abe and Donald Trump had a great relationship and friendship. I guess that's what's upset those on the left. When Abe did finally leave office in 2020, it was due to his ill health. The public still adored him. The Spectator has described him as Japan's indispensable conservative. Tony Abbott was also a very good friend of Shinzo Abe's, and Tony joins us shortly. But firstly, let's cross to Canberra to talk to Japan's ambassador to Australia, Yamagami-san, about this tragic news. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on Outsiders, and our condolences for your nation's great tragic loss. Ambassador, can you tell us what we know about the reasons behind the assassination and how the Japanese public is responding to this tragedy?
Well, good morning to you all, and thank you for having me. The motive, behind this, despicable act is still under investigation. And at this point, since the investigation is going on, I'd like to refrain myself from, making any specific comment. But as for Japanese public reaction, I could say it could be summarized in 4 words: shocked and saddened, enraged, and determined. Of course, most of the Japanese are so shocked to see this, heinous crime committed, in the streets of Japan in the broad daylight, and saddened we lost one of our greatest outstanding politicians because of this heinous act. And yes, we are angry, why could this happen in Japan? Is there anything, we could have done? And determined, we will never allow this kind of challenge against democracy, against the rule of law. So all in all, I think, Japanese people are united at this very difficult time.
James.
Ambassador, again, our condolences on the loss of Mr. Abe. One of the things I think is fascinating, I'd love for you to describe for our viewers a bit, is how Shinzo Abe led Japan's transition from a pacifist post-war nation to a real leader in the Pacific and in the Northern Pacific, and his understanding of the dangers of Chinese nationalism, Chinese militarism, I guess, to use that phrase, and his leadership in bringing together the U.S. and Australia particularly, which he had a lot of close connections with.
Yes. First of all, what strikes me is, this transformation of his evaluation. Mention was made that he was, once regarded as, divisive, polarizing, politician. So when he came to the center stage of Japanese politics, there are some, especially in the Western media, who regarded him as, suspicion and apprehension. But look at, this positive transformation, and he is now regarded as one of the giants on the world stage. And this is because I think his records at office speak volumes about his achievement. After all, I think he was ultimate strategist. He was architect of the Quad, and he gave new life to such endeavor as trans-Pacific partnerships. So, strategically speaking, and in terms of making new architecture for trade and investment in this region, I think he has left a tremendous achievement.
Rita.
Well, his record as a world leader, like you said, was stellar, and he was much loved at home. What's your reaction to some of the news reporting that has come after his death, particularly from the US media, who have characterised him as some sort of divisive or radical figure when he was so widely loved in Japan?
Well, I think after all, in order to leave any legacy in politics, as a student of international relations, my sense is, you will be loved by some people, and not by some others. So you cannot be nice to everybody, but in terms of Abe-san's legacy, it's crystal clear, not only in terms of raising Japan's profile on the world stage. He solidified Japan's alliance with the United States, and Prime Minister Albanese was quite right when he said Abe Shinzo was a true patriot, and Abe Shinzo was also a true friend of Australia. So he could be both.
Ambassador, Shinzo Abe was brought Japan out of, transferred Japan from its post-war pacifist era to recognizing that Japan must be able to defend itself. He took a lot of flack for that, but he succeeded. He's also been one of the staunchest supporters of Taiwan, unlike many of the world leaders, including shamefully some in this country, who turned their back on Taiwan. Shinzo Abe was very much of the opinion that Taiwan must be protected. We are now in a situation which I'm sure Shinzo Abe feared, where China has become more belligerent in its language around Taiwan. As a nationalist, which Shinzo Abe was, do you think that there's an increased risk now that we might see some kind of conflict in your region, and for that Shinzo Abe's prescience and foresight is to be applauded?
I think one of the biggest contributions made by Abe-san was he was astute, and he was more than conscious about what's happening in this region, Indo-Pacific region. What kind of challenges, opportunities are brought about by the rise of emerging powers? How should we maintain the rule of law at sea? He had a very strong consciousness on these points, but not only that, because of his skillfulness in terms of forging personal ties with other world leaders, he could share Japanese perspective, or he could let what's going on in this region to leaders of many other parts of the world. I think that was his biggest contribution, and he was determined that what's happening in Ukraine should never take place across the Taiwan Strait. So today's Ukraine should never become tomorrow's Taiwan. He was convinced about that.
Hear, hear. James.
Tell us about the politics of Japan now at the moment. The current government, I presume, is continuing to pursue Abe-san's legacy. Does the tragedy here galvanize the Japanese people further in their determination that, as you say, aggression from China should not be tolerated, and that these relationships with Australia, the United States, India, and the Quad, and other friendly powers in the region, that these must continue to secure his legacy?
I think the name of the game here is free and open Indo-Pacific. This is a word coined by Abe-san. Abe-san was determined to uphold the rule of law in this region or even across this region. And as far as Japanese public is concerned, I think the situation of Ukraine has dramatically changed the mindset of many Japanese, especially with regard to the importance of defending our own country. So all in all, led by leadership of politicians like Abe Shinzo, I think Japanese people's security mindset is transforming to a more practical and realistic way.
Rita.
Well, I just want to ask about the firearm used here. It's been reported it was a homemade firearm. Firearm crimes are relatively rare in Japan. Do you see this is going to fundamentally change how Japanese politicians campaign and the access the public has to them? Are they going to be behind screens now, have security separating crowds from the politicians going forward?
I think so. I think this is despicable act, and this should be condemned in the strongest possible terms. And yes, you are right in pointing out Japan has one of the strictest, gun control laws, and this kind of gun violences are quite unusual compared with other advanced countries. But that said, I mean, what happened has happened. So we are going through soul searching and humble self-reflections as to what went wrong. I was once in the police force in Japan, and I have no doubt when it comes to commitment of dedication of many in the Japanese police force. But that said, people are wondering, was there anything they could have done more, they could have done better? So in addition to gun control, the way to secure the safety of VIPs, dignitaries, I think there are many issues to be discussed in the near future.
Ambassador Yamagami-san, thank you so much for talking to us here on Outsiders this morning. Thank you for your time and your insights, and please pass on to the people of Japan the thoughts of the Australian people. We certainly have appreciated his wise leadership over the years. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And personally, I'm so touched by outpourings of well wishes and message of condolence and compassion coming from all the people from all way of life in Australia, including current, former prime minister, business people, journalists, think tankers. We are so moved, and this shows the achievement Abe-san did for the promotion of relationship between Australia and Japan. But thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.